today we'll be looking at the most requested facial analysis on my channel, Francisco Lachowski, also known as Chico, because Chico is just the nickname for Francisco in Brazil. Now, Chico here is a top model. He's surprisingly tall. He's 6'2.5", according to his bio. He won the Ford Men's Supermodel of the World contest in Sao Paulo in 2008. That's pretty much how he got his start. And then he modeled for a lot of top brands after that. He won the Model of the Year by Models.com in 2016. He's not ugly by any stretch of the imagination. If someone ever told me to just imagine a generic pretty boy, this is exactly who I would think of right here. I could sit here all day and talk about how he nails every measurement, but I'll just try to keep this short. His symmetry isn't perfect. His face is just wider on one side in every photo I can find of him, but it still falls in the realm of normal asymmetry that humans find attractive. Other than that, his symmetry is near perfect, with almost no deviation in areas like the eyes and nose and mouth. Chico's measurements are pretty average, and he doesn't have any deviant or mutant features. I always forget how tall he is because of his pretty boy look. Keep in mind that because of his height, he actually has a pretty huge skull. Big skulls are simply attractive on men, whether they imply more intelligence or whether they're dimorphic. Men simply have bigger skulls than women, and this is one of Chico's masculine features. This is what I'd like to get into next because I think this is the key to his attractiveness. He has to have some masculine features, otherwise women wouldn't find him appealing. He's not just 100% feminine, youthful features. And here's what I think those features are. First, his skull size, like I said. Second, his nasal angles. Now, he doesn't have a prominent masculine brow ridge, but he does have a low nasofrontal angle. And this is the angle between your brow ridge and your nose. And normal for men is 133 to 142. His is 135, 134, depending on what picture you look at. His nasal tip angle and nasolabial angle are also very masculine, very acute. Next is the cheekbone prominence ratio. This was determined by Penton-Vogt et al. To be sexually dimorphic. So it's higher in men, lower in women. And it's simply calculated by taking the cheekbone width and dividing it by the jaw width. Basically, this just shows how far the cheekbones stick out from the jaw and determines overall face shape. Now, his isn't out of control, but it is slightly above average, with a ratio of 1.2. Next is his gonial angle, seen right here. A normal gonial angle is 114 to 138 for Caucasian men. His looks to be on the much lower end, 115 to 118, depending on what picture I look at. But this is almost as low as it gets without looking abnormal. Another dimorphic parameter found by Penton-Vogt et al. Is the face width versus the lower face height, and this is lower in men. In Chico's case, he's lower than average, so all this means is he has a slightly longer face than average. Next is his forehead. This is pretty common, but he has a posteriorly inclined forehead, which looks more masculine. Finally, his eye width to height ratio. Basically, his eyes are just wider than they are tall. This is just a thing that's common in male models across the board. They all have a killer eye area, and their eyes are all wider than they are tall in comparison to the rest of the population. But other than that, that is pretty much it. He's got so many things that make him look youthful. For example, his agiosal, which is just the baby fat that's on the eyelid. He has an overall non-dimorphic face, a lot of youthful health indicators. You could dress him up as a girl and he wouldn't look too bad. But I have to gag every time I see these face app transformations. There's just something uncanny and weird about him. Also, you guys know the drill. Give this video a like for me. For every like that this video gets, you get a nanometer of jaw growth. I know it ain't much, but it's honest work. Anyway, his non-dimorphic face is kind of the reason why I think he looks at his best, actually, when he lost some weight. Because facial fat is pretty feminizing. The fatter you are, the more feminine you look. And when Chico gets really, really skinny, it brings out his inner bone structure, makes him look more angular, and just makes him look more masculine. I think this is his best look right here. Also, he started growing out a beard when he looks older, which also looks good. I think it appeals to more people. But otherwise, if I was in high school, I would definitely want his skinnier look. Pretty boys don't really age too well, but just imagine being in high school looking like this guy. You would be set. Next, I want to talk about his forward growth. I think one thing he does a lot is he seems to be tucking his chin. He's tucking his chin in a lot of pictures, and I've heard some people call him recessed before because he's doing this, but he is definitely not recessed, at least not in the mandible. In other photos, you can clearly see that his facial forward growth is really, really good, but I do think his mandible developed better than his maxilla, his upper jaw, which I think has some mild hypoplasia. This just means he has a little bit less bone naturally by his eye area, which is actually pretty common. But this is also why people think he has a negative orbital vector, which essentially means that the eyeball is in front of the cheek in a side profile view. But I don't think he has that either. Orbital vector is one of those things that makes me consider facial aesthetics a pseudoscience. The main problem with it is your head tilt. You can make your orbital vector look however you want by tilting your head up or down. Before I get into this further, let me define orbital vector first. So, according to this study, negative orbit vector is defined as the most anterior globe portion protruding past the malar eminence. So when you read this, you think it's referring to the bone. But then, if you go into the study itself, you see that's not how they measured it. So here they show you how they measure it. This vertical line here is basically where the front of the cornea is at, and R is the distance to the orbital rim. But that's not what they're measuring. They show here that they're measuring to C, which is the distance from the anterior cornea to the anterior cheek mass. So they're just measuring soft tissue here. Here's another study where they show that they're measuring to the soft tissue and not the bone. And so far from what I can gather, the only standard for determining where the vertical line is that you're going to draw to determine the orbital vector, it's basically just a vertical line drawn straight down, assuming you're in your natural stance, in a natural head position, head not hyperextended or hypoextended. But natural head position is difficult to get right, and it's not always immediately obvious in a photo. So when people are trying to determine orbital vector from photos, they're pretty much just guessing. So this makes it harder to determine with Chico because it looks like he's tucking his chin a lot in a lot of pictures. But going off of most pictures, does he have a negative orbital vector? Not really. There's plenty of pictures where he doesn't. Now, personally, I have a different approach to measuring orbital vector. Like, here's how I think it should be done. First, I draw where I think the Frankfurt horizontal plane is. So this is just the line from the tragus, or the ear hole basically, to what looks like the orbital rim. But then I use that line to align the picture by making it completely horizontal. And yeah, I'm guessing where this is at, but you can pretty much tell with soft tissue. It still works though. Like this guy here is recessed, but you can tell the green line is pointing backwards, so it's a negative orbital vector. This guy has a class 3 malocclusion. His maxilla is recessed, but his mandible is normal. This guy had a Leyfort surgery, and he pretty much fixed his negative orbital vector. Here's David Gandy. I've also heard other people say he has a negative orbital vector. His is kind of neutral in my book. Here's the goat right here. This is Sean O'Pry. He's got the most positive orbital vector out of the people I've tested. Angelina, hers is positive. No surprise there. I just think this is a way better system for guessing orbital vector off of soft tissue, but I'm not an aesthetics scientist, just my opinion. And this isn't perfect either, because if you gain fat, you're still measuring to the soft tissue, and the Frankfurt plane isn't the same on everybody either. I just feel like orbital vector should be one of those things that's determined by medical imaging and not guessing based off of a photograph. And then here's Chico. Looks kind of neutral, but really it's positive. So I would not say that he has a negative orbital vector by any stretch of the imagination. Yes, his midface is a little flat. He is missing some bony structure in the midface, but his face still grew forward. He still looks good. You don't need to max out every single feature. I mean, even forward growth is just one out of many sets of parameters. Really, his biggest strength is harmony, and he just needed to be slightly above average in pretty much everything else. Overall, I think he's missing just a little bit of extra masculinity to appeal to the most amount of people. I mean, there's clearly people that don't like him, but at the same time, there's clearly a lot that do. Look at some of these YouTube comments here. Some girls like more balanced sex hormones, whereas some girls just go crazy for hypermasculine guys. That's why you can't appeal to everybody. There's no such thing as a perfect 10. Remember, if you want your forward growth and your face analyzed, we have a facial analysis report. And let me know who you guys want analyzed next. Thank you for watching.